Well, that meeting, that working dinner continues, so let's get more now on the shake-up going on at the European Parliament. Let's speak to Nina Schick from the think tank Open Europe. So, just quickly, what's your standpoint? Are you pro-European but anti-federalist? In short, do you agree with what David Cameron had to say going into that meeting, that the EU is too big, too bossy and too interfering?
Yes, absolutely. Our position is that Europe desperately needs reform in order to survive. Now, the interesting thing about Cameron's meeting tonight is that he actually has a lot of headwind going in his direction now. With the one thing that we saw from Sunday's election, clearly, is that the EU status quo is no longer an option. So if Europe is to survive, then the EU desperately needs to embrace reform. For far too long, European citizens have been faced with the option of either choosing more Europe or less Europe, and no middle path of a reformed Europe. And that is indeed what European leaders will be discussing today.
So what does reform in that context actually mean? Practically, what does it mean? We've had the Tories started talking about the deportation of EU citizens if they haven't found work in 6 months, for example, tighter controls perhaps on who gets benefits when they arrive here. But what are you talking about when you talk about reform?
When we talk about reform, we say that Brussels should concentrate on the big things that it's good at. So negotiating free trade deals with the rest of the world, as it's currently doing with the US, for example. And the second point on immigration, which you just made, although that's a very heated topic here in the UK, it's also a heated topic in other European countries, including Germany, Holland, and in fact, the Scandinavian countries. But that can be gotten around without, if we preserve the free movement of people, but tighten access to benefits. I believe that's something that Europe can work on as well.
So what powers would be returned to the national governments, and would it be enough for the local electorates who've given a bloody nose to many of the leaders in Europe?
When we talk about returning power to the national governments, for example, if you look at the voter turnout in the European Parliamentary elections, although all European citizens are allowed to vote on that, that's been on an abysmal decline ever since the European Parliamentary elections were first introduced. So the idea is that national parliaments become more involved in the EU decision-making process, so that citizens across Europe feel that Brussels is an institution that's so remote from them. They feel closer to Brussels.
Well, high on the agenda tonight will be early discussions about who will take on the leadership of key roles coming up, not least the unelected European Commission President. Should we start asking questions about why that is an unelected position? And can David Cameron have any sway in that regard?
Yes, so the leading candidate for the largest group in the European Parliament is Jean-Claude Juncker. Now, he is the epitome of arch-federalist, old-school European, and it wouldn't be very good for David Cameron if he were to become the next Commission President. However, insiders say that other European leaders are also not united on whether Juncker should become the next Commission President, precisely because these election results show that Europe cannot go on doing business as usual. And if they were to elect a new Commission President who represents precisely that wouldn't be very good for the EU. I think that we'll see a lot of debate in the next few days, but ultimately it'll come down to the real power players, such as Angela Merkel, deciding on whether or not Juncker will be the next Commission President.
And for UKIP, now of course going in as the biggest UK party in Europe, what do they do now?
Well, UKIP is obviously resting on the laurels of their defeat, and again, victory. And what we can see, what we can see from that is, again, as I already mentioned, that it's a damning condemnation of the status quo. However, the interesting thing is that even though we've seen this huge anti-establishment vote pulling into the new European Parliament, you have to point out that those parties are so divergent amongst themselves that whether or not they'll be able to work together effectively in the Parliament is far from known, and we'll have to follow what happens in the next few days to see how this all develops.
Lots of discussions underway, certainly. Nina Schick from the think tank Open Europe. Thank you.
Thank you.